Well, good evening, everybody. Well, it's evening here in London. Good morning, good afternoon, wherever you are. And welcome to the latest of our Harif lockdown lectures. For those of you who don't know Harif, we are the UK Association of Jews from the Middle East and North Africa, and we aim to raise awareness of the history and culture of these Jews. I'd like to thank Jemena, who are co-organizing this evening's event, today's event, I should say, which is entitled Jewish Identity, Jewish Diversity. Just two things before I introduce tonight's speaker. The first is that this event is being recorded. It's actually being live streamed to the Harif web page, Facebook page. And the other thing is, if you would like to put a question, please just type it in the chat box at the bottom of your screen. And I'll be very happy to put the question to our speaker. So without more ado, let me introduce tonight's speaker. I'm extremely honored to have him here. Baruch haba.
Thank you.
Zion Ozeri. Zion is a leading photographer. He's an award-winning photographer born in Israel to immigrants from Yemen. He currently lives in New York City. And he is a photographer who likes to explore the Jewish experience. He did study in New York. His work has been exhibited in Jerusalem, at the Israel Museum, at Bet Hatfutzot in Tel Aviv. He's been exhibited in Chicago, in New York, and in Buenos Aires. He's also published a few books, including The Jewish World Family Haggadah. He runs a couple of interesting projects which aim, I think, to introduce photography into schools. One is called The Jewish Lens, and it's currently in schools in North America and Israel. And recently, Zion launched the Diversity Lens, or diversity lens curriculum and program for public schools with the New York City Department of Education. So without more ado, I'd like to hand over to Zion, who will be taking us for a world tour of Jewish communities that he has photographed. Over to you, Zion. Thank you.
Thank you. I would just like to add that everything I do recently in the last decade and a half, actually, is like using photography as a springboard to teach about Jewish values, community, the Jewish world, Israel, and also about diversity in any given communities. And so I'm going to share my screen and I'll speak pretty fast, I think. Every few minutes, 5-10 minutes, whenever Lynn decides, I will answer a question or two from the audience. Please put it on the chat. So let me share my screen. Okay. 1 second. It gives me a sec. Share screen. Okay. All right. I'm almost there. Can you see me? Can you see the screen?
Yes.
Perfectly, yes.
All right, good, good. So Jewish identity, Jewish diversity, this had been really basically my work for the last few decades. And I would like to share a few things that on one hand, when you travel around the world, the Jewish world, you see how different, seemingly different we all are So to me was always what was intriguing. Okay, so what is common to all of us in spite of our differences, whether this is culture or the geography or what have you. So I will start with imagery from sanctuaries or places of worship, you know. So here we are, and this is known to everyone, the wall in Jerusalem. And let's continue, and then we'll go to, I'm going to show you a few other synagogue or places of worship. And let's just look at the commonality between all of them, but they're all common. So here, there's always the symbols that we have, whether it's the menorah, Magen David, or the or the Torah, which is, this is actually in St. Petersburg in Russia. And I was taking it back in the early 1990s. So you see the familiar, and here we are. I mean, if we look at this, this one here, and they're putting together back the Torah to be put in the ark. What do you look at this photograph. This is another, synagogue, and this is actually in Colombia. And if you look at the Torah here, you can tell that this is a Sephardic Torah. Why? Because it's actually in a box. Usually it's a wooden box. The Ashkenazi Torahs, as you can see in this photograph, they're like wrapped, but they're not in a wooden box. So this is a Sephardi minyan and a synagogue in Bogota, Colombia. Look here. I don't know how many of the people in the audience are actually in London or in England, but this I took just a year ago, almost a year ago, actually last August in London. This is Central Synagogue. This is during Tisha B'Av. Okay, and you can see this is the finishing, so you see how we do a Hagbaha, and this is in Central Synagogue in London. Again, you can see no matter where you are, it's the same talitot, it's the same Torah, it's the same, with slight differences. And here we are in another synagogue. This is in the Lower East Side of Manhattan. This is the Eldridge Street Synagogue. I was taking this photograph for a magazine or a newspaper, when they were like actually renovating the synagogue and fixing up this windows. And again, you see this, the same familiar things. And here we are. I usually do this as an interactive activity. And here we are in another synagogue. And I usually like to ask the audience, where do you think we are? Where in the world we are?
I think we're all muted except for me. So perhaps I could venture a guess and say it's the one in Tunisia, in Jerba?
Exactly, in Jerba. And the title for this photograph, it was not my title. I usually give a title to every photograph that I have. And every photograph, by the way, it's a whole story, and I can talk about every photograph for, quite a long time, but we won't do it because of time. So this one, the El Ghriba Synagogue in Tunisia, in Jerba. And this title was given to me by my close friend who looked at it and immediately says, oh, waiting for 7 Jews. Okay, so we're talking about minyan and so on. So this is, so it was, Yossi Klein Halevi, if you know him. So he right away, he's a writer, he's a great writer, and he just looked at it and said, oh, waiting for 7 Jews. And I said, you know what? I'm going to take that title. I like it. So this is in that, by the way, that synagogue was bombed. I think it was a little bit more than 10 years ago. I mean, they were trying to bomb it, and they managed to kill a bunch of, I don't know, I think maybe 17 German tourists, but the bomb went off outside of the synagogue, and thank God it did not damage the synagogue. This synagogue, according to the local tradition, was built with a stone that was brought from the destruction of the Second Temple. So that's how they founded it. This is according to the local tradition. So, okay, let's continue, with synagogue.
First question for you, Zion.
Yes.
Why you choose black and white to do your photos in black and white? And,
it's a good, well, basically when I was going to school to photo, you know, I did a whole bunch of schooling in Israel and here, but when I went to school for photography and art, I went in New York City. And back in the 70s, you know, that's when I went to school, the late 70s and early 80s, the photographers of note, the ones that we all admire, were all taking photographs basically in black and white. So I would just like that, you know, so I like that medium. But also, I think it's also allows me to let the eye of the observer to be focused on what I, you know, on the message rather than the, color in photography sometimes brings certain beauty or certain things, certain information that is not always necessary. You know, sometimes it is, but you know, so I rather just focus on what the message that I want to give you. Sometimes I do take pictures and, you know, with color, but, you know, and I chose here not to bring in color so much. But basically that's what it is. I like the medium. I like the black and white. I like the seriousness of it. And also I like that we can focus on the message rather than be enthralled with, let's say, certain beauties and something that does not belong in, you know, in the message. Okay, so here we are, another synagogue. This is actually a synagogue that no longer exists. I was on assignment in the Bronx to take a photograph of a minyan, actually in a synagogue that was dwindling because the community, the Jewish community, was leaving that area of the Bronx. So I'm taking these photographs right after their shachrit, I mean the morning services, and you can see the tzedakah box. They also have, you know, a kind of replica of the Western Wall on the background. Again, these are all things that we are familiar with. Doesn't matter what synagogue in the world we are. And here we are in a synagogue without walls. Look at this. This photograph was taken a few years ago, not too long ago, actually in Yafo, Tel Aviv. And whereas there is a minyan every day at around 12 o'clock, all the vendors of the flea market in Yafo just know to come. If they want to daven, they go to this shop and they just have mincha time. This isn't their mincha time. It's basically right out of the shop. So sometimes we can do, and you know, thing without actually walls. And that would lead me to another one. This is a photograph of, actually, it's a place in Venice, California, Los Angeles, right on the beach. As you can tell, this is Bet Shuva. Bet Shuva is the place for people who are addicted to all kinds of things. And you can, if you want, and anybody can come in. You don't have to be Jewish, but you do have to go through a certain discipline, which is morning prayers, and then you go and, you know, you surf and you do all kinds of things. So I woke up very early in the morning to take this photograph. Venice, California. Again, no walls, but you know, we don't always need walls. This is the renowned, anybody who can recognize Debbie Friedman. Debbie Friedman was one of the, not only singers, but she was a composer, and she composed a few liturgical melodies and prayers, one of which is Misheberach. You know, I don't know if you know that melody. It's really sung in so many synagogues now across the United States and beyond. And she was basically doing healings, you know, for people. She used her singing and the liturgy and to do basically healing. And you can see this is in Aspen, California, in Colorado, Aspen, Colorado, in Colorado. Okay, this is, you can see the mountain behind her. And she passed away a little too young, but you know, I can't remember exactly, maybe 8 years ago, 10 years ago. And here we are again, no walls. This is in, you know, in Sde Boker. You know, some people woke up to say the Shema with the sunrise. You know, that's when you start. The Shema it's very timely. It's in the evening, I mean, the morning and evening. And in the morning, you can't say the Shema before sunrise. So you can see the sun is rising. And I took this photograph in Sde Boker in the Negev in Israel. I think we are going to something else now. We have done synagogue. Let's see another thing that is common to so many places around the Jewish world, yet people somehow think that all Jews are very wealthy and we also, all of us control the world. So here is an image in Kiev, the Ukraine, a very, impoverished lady, in her own kitchen. And she was getting every week, she had visitors from the JDC and so on, but this is at her home in the kitchen in Kiev that I took back in the early 90s. Poverty afflicts us all over the place. This is in Jerusalem. It's a place called Meir Panim. Meir Panim is a bunch of soup kitchens that are in different places and cities in Israel. This one is in Jerusalem. Okay, again, this, soup kitchen in Jerusalem. And here is another soup kitchen. This is in Manhattan, New York City, on 23rd Street and 8th Avenue. Whereas anyone who is hungry around 12 o'clock or so during noontime can just come into the synagogue and you can have a free lunch. So this is a homeless guy coming out of the soup kitchen in Manhattan. Again, well, there's another guy, we have another person. This is actually, I'm throwing you all the way to Samarkand in Uzbekistan, Bukharan Jews, okay? And you see the tzedakah box. This is the largest tzedakah box I have seen in, I think ever. It's almost as large as the person leaning on that pole. And Samarkand, there's, as you know, probably, the Bukharan Jews who lived in Uzbekistan and also Tajikistan and a few other places around, but mostly in Uzbekistan, Bukharan Jews have left en masse once the Soviet Union was, broke up and allowed Jews to immigrate. So now we only have maybe, I'm not sure to the exact number, but tens of thousands of them left, mainly to Israel and also to New York City, to mainly in Queens, but not only. Here, there's another photograph of a family, actually. These are all siblings. And in Havana, Cuba, okay, Havana, Cuba, they're also were being supported by the local Jewish community that had, by the way, since that I was there about 10 years ago, have dwindled. One more, I think, about poverty, and we'll go to something hopefully a little happier. This one is in, you see, Bet Chabad Almagro. This is in Argentina, in Buenos Aires. In the early 2000s, if you recall, there was a major, crisis, economical crisis in Argentina. And there were many soup kitchens that opened up all across the country and also in Buenos Aires. So these are people who are waiting to go into the soup kitchen in the synagogue. Okay, so again, what I'm trying to say is like, look, we have everything within the Jewish community everywhere. We are actually, if you will, mirror to the world. That's who I think the Jewish community is.
Zion, I just had a comment from Janet Lipsy, who's actually been to Cuba, and she visited them 4 years ago, so she'll be able to give us some up-to-date information on the community in Cuba, maybe later on.
Okay, of course. Yeah, I know one thing. My assistant, who was a physician in Havana, I hired her for the 10 days or two weeks that I was there. And all I remember is that the day rate that I paid her was more than 1 month's salary as a physician. One day, wow. That was, so anyways.
And Adrian Banks has been to the Jewish community in Camagüey.
Camagüey, yes. I am actually going to show you, I think I did include a photograph from Camagüey later on. We'll get to, I think so, if I recall. Okay, let's continue. Okay, this is, I think, the last one with poverty. These are two sisters. This is an interesting photograph on many levels. We use it a lot in teaching about responsibility within the Jewish lens. You know, how do you call it? Curriculum. It's the curriculum is being taught in many schools across the world, actually, and it's being run now. I have run it for a while, but now it's being run by the Bet Hatfutzot Museum in Tel Aviv. So this photograph, if you look at it, I wish I could interact a little better with you guys, but you can see here, you know, the one person who's standing actually was, I met her first at the local JCC in Riga, Latvia. And I was there for a visit, obviously take photographs, and I saw this lady who's standing up, touching her sister. And she was there, and I was very intrigued by her face, and I came over and I asked through a translator, you know, what is she doing there? And it turns out that she had two big bags that she was holding, and it turned out that once a month, you know, people who had no means would come to the JCC and they would get, you know, all kind of products, you know, like flour and sugar and what have you, oil. And so she was like, really, she looked very frail to me. And I asked her, how far did she live? How far from the JCC she lived? And she told me that she was, it took her, you know, she needed to take 3 buses. And it was about an hour and a half. And I asked my assistant / driver, I said, you know, how long would it take with our car to take her? And he said, no, barely 20 minutes. So I said, why don't we take her? And we did take her. And on the way, she told us that she was taking care of her sister who was mentally handicapped. And they lived in this dilapidated building, you know, in Riga. And I was struggling to take a photograph, what kind of photographs to take. And then I took this one, and I just felt that this is the one that can really illustrate how one sister feeling the responsibility of taking care of her own sibling. You know, this is exactly the opposite, if you recall, you know, the biblical first, you know, Abel and Cain. You recall there was no, you know, not only no responsibility, that's where the first murder occurred.
No love lost between them, no.
Right. Anyway, let's go on. I'm going to go now into a little, speed it up a little bit. And if there's any question on the chat, Lynn, just stop me.
Yes, sure.
Yeah, right. Okay.
So far we just have comments. For instance, Veronique says the photographs are very moving. And then other comments from people who've actually visited some of the places you mentioned.
Okay, good. So here we are. I'm going to show you some photographs of cemeteries. I don't know if you know, but look at this cemetery. This is the Mount of Olives in Jerusalem. And you can see the Golden Dome all the way far in the background. And I have it also in color, by the way. Then you can see that the golden, you know, that it's actually made of gold. So this is one of the most ancient, you know, the ancient cemeteries in Israel, the Mount of Olives. And look, I mean, there's so much to learn, by the way, from cemeteries. And I would highly recommend for anyone who is visiting anywhere. I know no one is traveling right now, but even if you go to your own local cemetery, you can see, and I'm going to show you some, I don't know how many people are actually from, you know, England, the UK or London, but I'll show you something soon. So here, you know, we see this headstone. This is in Câmpina in Romania. And we all know, most of us know, that the hands that we see here is actually means that a Kohen was buried there, you know, a priest that they were always, you know, they were obligated or they were commanded to actually bless the people of Israel. So in synagogues, a few times a year, depend what, you know, Sephardim do it more often than Ashkenazim, you know, the Kohanim go to the Bima and they do the blessing of, you know, for the whole community. So this is in Romania, and you can see that, you know, similarities. But look, if we jump from Romania, right, and we go to Michigan in the United States, this is Sheboygan, Michigan. This is a little newer. This headstone is a little bit more modern, but the same idea. The person who was buried there is, you know, was a Kohen. And this is why you have this hands there on the gravesite. Let's go and look at this. This is actually in Prague. Have anybody been in Prague?
see the chat. Yeah.
Are we okay, Lynn?
Yeah. We've been to Prague. Yeah.
Okay, and if you go to the cemetery, there's a very small cemetery, and you notice that the headstones are very close to the other, are like one is back of the other. And the reason for it, at least that's what I was told, that at some point the Jews were not allowed to expand the cemetery, and they have to bury some people standing up. And this headstone actually is of a tailor. You can see this. You see the Caesar on the headstone? I mean, he was a tailor. So they put that on his headstone. Look, we're jumping around a little bit, and we are. I mean, it's in actually Buenos Aires, Argentina, in the cemetery there.
Yes, a very sad sight.
Right, because it's the headstone was vandalized. And and I gave a title to it, which it's kind of plain on words. Rest in pieces. That's my title to it. And it's amazing, I show this photo, some non-Jews saw this picture and said to me, I don't understand. They hate dead Jews too. And I say, well, that's interesting comment,
Tell me one thing, there's a photograph, the photograph on the headstone. Have you seen that a lot in Jewish cemeteries?
Not a lot, but you see it here and there, especially actually in the former Soviet Union. They put a lot of the, images of the deceased on on the headstone. A lot in the former Soviet Union, especially Soviet Union, you see it a lot. This is rare, usually people, we don't, but it's, so this, yes, that was one a rarity that I saw, and I took this photograph. And here we are. Okay.
I would guess this is Morocco.
Fez, Morocco. Lynn, you had been traveling quite a bit. Good for you.
I've never actually been there, but it just looks like it.
So this is in Fez, Morocco, and you can see the Jewish caretaker is standing in the front with his non-Jewish assistant. That's in Fez, Morocco. Now, can you guess where this is? No, I don't think so. But this photograph is actually, I was in Bushey Cemetery in London. This is last year in August. And all of a sudden I see in the distance, I'm taking pictures of a headstone and all kind of things. And all of a sudden in the distance, I see people, a bunch of, Jewish people. And I was very intrigued. So I came close. It turned out that these are, a bunch of rabbis who decided that they would like also to participate in lowering the body to the grave. And they were just, and they had to, kind of practice how to do it. So when they want to do it, because they figured it's another mitzvah. It's another mitzvah to actually help in the burial. And this is only a practice. There is no body in the, in this box. Just some heavy, so they put something heavy there so they can actually feel like they're lowering and not knocking the, the casket around too much. So this is in Bushey Cemetery in London, just last year. And here we are back in Israel. I caught these young soldiers. They're all paratroopers. Right before they were going to swearing in the Kotel, in the Western Wall in Jerusalem. The swearing in of the paratroopers and some other units is always at the wall in Jerusalem.
Right.
And so we have, but I managed to find some other, soldiers, not Israeli. Look at this. This is in Colorado Springs. This is, you see on their t-shirts, it says U.S. Air Force Academy. This is basically basic training for cadets in the Air Force Academy in Colorado Springs. They have a synagogue there. And I had permission to come into the base and take pictures on a Friday afternoon.
So these are all Jewish
they're all Jewish, and anyone who is partly Jewish or thinks that he should be Jewish comes to the synagogue because it's basic training is not easy in any army. So for them to have 2 hours of a late Friday afternoon coming to a synagogue and drinking some wine and challah and not being beaten up and being, training and practicing, it's a good reprieve. So you have a lot of them come in. Most of them are Jewish, or at least the one parent who is Jewish and so on. But they found out that to be a Jew is a good thing, especially on a Friday afternoon. So that's, so. Okay, I'm going to show you something a little happier. These are some weddings and pre-wedding and henna. This is a Yemenite bride being fixed up with this whole thing that is made of gold and silver. And it's very fancy and heavy and not comfortable, but that's what Yemenite Jews used to do. And to this day also, they do it in Israel, actually, to this day. And you don't own these things, you basically rent this, and people come and,
I always wondered whether the bride has ever fainted, actually, with all that heavy stuff on her. And
yeah, well,
especially in the heat.
Yeah, it's quite heavy and it's quite hot. And here is another photograph that you see. This is actually of my family. It's again a bride, and there is a whole procession and singing, and it's really the henna party was really primarily, at least with Yemenite Jews, was really for the women actually to celebrate the leaving of the bride to another household, and some of it's mixed with some sadness, because sometimes she would have to move to another village, and in Yemen back then, transportation was not the best in the world, and sometimes it would take months for her to see her parents, and she was always hoping that she would be treated nicely at the household that she would be. It's a whole thing to this ceremony.
Right.
Okay, so here we are. I'm throwing you back right into Uzbekistan and Bukhara, and this is also this is actually the wedding ceremony, the day before the wedding ceremony, and you see here something that I have not seen anywhere. This is only for the family to be. I was the only one allowed, that not non-family, to be there. This is a ceremony, and if you look at the groom, his shirt is open, even his zipper in his pants is open. And the reason for that, and you see all the people are with their hands open.
Yes.
And it's kind of a superstitious kind of belief. You want to make sure that everybody is wishing you well, not giving you, as they say in Yiddish, a kind of horror. And everything is open. So in other words, there's nothing that is locked or closed. So they will have good luck in their new life. That's the stand behind this ceremony in Bukharan Jews.
How extraordinary. His trousers are open as well.
Yeah. So, okay, I'm going to, this is another ceremony. This is in a synagogue, actually in Buenos Aires. And they have a custom of signing off, the bride and the groom signing off in the book of the community book. So this is in the synagogue in Buenos Aires, Libertad Synagogue. It's called the Libertad Synagogue.
Sorry, Theo, just a comment about the previous picture.
Yeah, go ahead.
Ida commented the bride was all closed up. Is it just something that the bridegroom should be?
This one, which one? This photograph you're talking about?
Yes, she's all wrapped up in her veil and her dress, and
right. But behind her. Yeah, behind her, something you don't see, the mother of the bride actually holds a thread. I mean, how do you call it? A needle and a thread. And she goes and she puts the needle through the dress in her back and takes it out and put it in and out. So things would just flow for them.
Oh, wow. What are
so there's the whole kind of, yes. Anyway, so here we are, and we are here in Bombay or Mumbai in India, and you see, reading the Ketubah, right? Okay, we have it everywhere. So this is in Mumbai,
And this is the B'nai Israel ceremony?
Yes, B'nai Israel, right. I mean, you know, in India, as you well, some of you know, even though there's very, very few Jews there, you know, you can kind of in the few thousands, you know, there's still, you would think, you know, that there would be, the community would be homogeneous, but it's not. You have the B'nai Israel, which is the biggest community. Then you have the, how do you call it, the Baghdadi Jews, you have the Kochini Jews, and you have B'nai Menashe up to the north. So, you know, so it's amazing how diverse the community is, even though there's only a few thousand there. This is in the south of France, you know, and it's, again, it's a wedding, and you see also reading the ketubah. And I would not elaborate a lot more because I'm afraid we'll be running out of time, and I have still a few things to show you.
Yes,
Lynn,
keep going as long as you can, as long as you have to run to.
Okay, here we are actually in another happy moment. This is Brit Milah, and this is Mexico City. And you can tell probably who is the most worried person in this photograph. And it's the young man who is, you know, like any man who is the father of the baby, always nervous, making sure that this is going to go fast and easy and without any incidents. So this is a Brit Milah in Mexico City, Mexico. Again, we're back to Bukhara, and this is you know, a photograph. I have not seen this custom anywhere else. And this is right before circumcision ceremony, before the Brit Milah. What happened is you see the old lady who is sitting, actually, and the other women hovering over her, and you can see baby's feet protruding from that blanket. And you see someone is holding a kettle and also a pail of, you know, and the kind of custom is to wash the baby's feet. The old lady puts her hand, she is like the most revered and maybe great grandmother or something. And the water that it gets poured on the baby's feet reaches this matriarch hands. And then she makes a blessing for the baby, blessing for the community, blessing for all. And then they take the baby to be circumcised. So this is the only place that I saw on earth, so to speak, where women take an active role in the circumcision ceremony, which I really liked. Okay, now I'm asking you to look very carefully at this photograph, because the second photograph, so this photograph is in Brooklyn, New York, Williamsburg, the Satmar Hasidim. Don't ask me how they let me in, but they did. Okay? So this is, they study, this is the 3 years old. This is a shortly after they do the upsheren, when they cut the hair and they leave the peyot.
Yes.
And they start to study the Aleph Bet, right? So this is in Williamsburg, Satmar Hasidim, Brooklyn, New York. And look at this photograph. This photograph is in Yemen.
Yes, very similar, isn't it?
Very, very similar. Okay. So, here and here, not much of a difference. Yes, there is a difference in the clothing and the band, the geography, the place, and so on and so forth, but not much when it comes to the really the content, the most important thing. Here, I'm just showing you a few kids. This is in Rehovot, Israel, in a kindergarten, and this is actually a kid this is in a school, Jewish school in Casablanca, and this is immediately after lunch, so they're doing the benching. They're saying, the Birkat Hamazon. Okay? The kid is missing a couple of teeth, but, he's able to say Birkat Hamazon even without. And this is a photograph, I don't know why I put it in, but this is from that Satmar community, and this is towards the end of the day, and you can tell that none of these students are listening to their teacher, the rabbi. Everyone has had enough, and they're really, ready to retire. Okay, this is another photograph from a summer camp up in Washington State. Again, this is something, summer camp for the most part this year because of the pandemic are not going to happen. This is actually an Orthodox school in Baltimore, where girls have their own minyan, and they read from the Torah on Mondays and Thursdays. Okay.
Amazing. Yes.
And this school, I don't believe it exists anymore. This is in Harare, in Zimbabwe. Used to be Rhodesia.
Yeah.
Yeah,
Yes.
used to be Rhodesia. Now it's Zimbabwe. This is a school in that, but when I was there years ago, there were maybe 80% of the school that, body was not Jewish anymore. But I don't think that school exists anymore.
No, I don't think there are any Jews left in Zimbabwe.
Right.
Very
there
few.
There are very few. And this is a Friday when they do about to do Kabbalat Shabbat.
Right.
Okay, something else. Look at this guy. What do you think he's doing? He's a shochet, right? A ritual slaughterer. He's holding the knife in his mouth. You can't see, but trust me, he has a chicken. He's holding a chicken he's about to slaughter, right? This is in Yemen. I was in Yemen the first time in 1992, and there I went again. So this is on the road. He was going around from the different villages to actually the slaughtering of chickens for the community, okay? And look at this. So we're in Yemen, and now we are in Bukhara, in Uzbekistan.
Same idea.
The same idea. Look at this. He's also holding the, Now you can see I included the chicken here just so you believe me, okay?
So Sarah was worried you were going to say he's sharpening the knife on his teeth.
No, he's just they have a way to hold it, and so they don't get, that the knife is very, very, very sharp. Before every time they about to slaughter another chicken or whatever it is, they have to check it after each time. So believe me, it's very, very sharp.
Mm-hmm. Wow.
And this is another shochet who's actually, sharpening his knife. You can see the blood all over himself. This is in Israel, in Rosh Ain, Israel, Yemenite, actually, shochet.
Shochet.
Yes.
I stand corrected about Harare, Zimbabwe. Barbara tells us there is a Jewish community in Harare, a partner of Kulanu, an organization that supports Jews around the world.
Right. There are very few left, not that much, but there are a few left. I can tell you another story about why sometimes Jews leave for all kind of crazy reasons, but I don't know that we'll have time. Well, let's see. Let me just go on a little bit and then stop me if there's a question, Lynn. Okay?
Yeah.
Okay, here. Sofre Stam, scribes, right? This is in India, in Bombay, in India. Okay, he's fixing a Torah. Okay? And he had his training in Israel, actually. Look at this guy, south of France.
Yeah,
this is the south of France. Okay? Okay, again, Sofer Stam.
Yeah.
Look at this woman. She's a Soferet Stam in California. Okay?
It had to be California.
Of course, So I took a photograph coming out, I took a photograph from outside of the house, through the window, and that's why you see all this reflection. But she is Soferet Stam.
Yeah.
Okay? And look at this. We're back. You know where we are, Lynn?
In England.
And Golders Green,
Green, hooray.
Yes, there is a place. These are all, scribes who are checking on so that was also from last year where I took some photographs of, of different things in the English, Jewish community. Right. And here I'm still in England. Can anybody guess? This is at Cambridge University, the Geniza.
Oh, the Geniza.
The Cairo Geniza. I was allowed to come and take photographs. There was a visit by about 20 rabbis that came to Cambridge, and we had a lecture that was beyond fascinating. And this is at the end of the lecture. They were checking all kind of fragments and documents, and this was, I felt so privileged to be there. Not only because to take a photograph, but to listen to the lecture that was given by a non-Jew, actually. His knowledge was beyond anything I've heard, his knowledge of the Geniza, of the parchment, unbelievable. And, it dates back to, more than 1,000 years, the Geniza.
Yeah. Maybe we can have a lockdown lecture on it.
I would call, that's something you can do, because the Geniza was primarily, Cairo back then was the center of Jewish, Judaism, so to speak, and the Jewish world. And any question that were asked by any community, they send it usually to Cairo, because the leadership, the rabbinical leadership in Cairo, was the most important. And they, and you know, you would, they're very good. You'll see a lot of documents and a lot of important. You saw how Cairo was important back then in the Jewish world. It was the center, basically. You know.
We have a comment from Juliet. She's from Cairo.
Okay.
So, in fact, we have people from all over the world, Zion.
Right. So anyway, so this is a photograph there, and you can see, you know, from the Geniza. This is a tight shot I took of one of the pieces of the fragments that I took a picture of. Okay. In Cambridge, the Geniza. I took a whole bunch of photographs, but this is just to show you a close-up.
And this would be 1,000 years old, wouldn't it?
Yes. Yeah. And here we are. This is an interesting story. This is back in Bukhara in Uzbekistan. They were fixing the walls in this synagogue, very old synagogue, and all of a sudden, lo and behold, you know, the wall is made out of kind of, how shall I say, some kind of a material. This is not, you know, that put in, you know, it's not like something modern or anything. And they started taking out, so they fixed the wall because it was cracking. All of a sudden they found all these scrolls, Torah scrolls, hidden in the wall, because you're not allowed to, you know, just throw them. You have to bury them. So they buried them into the wall, and they took them. All of a sudden they saw them, and they allowed me to take a photograph of that. You can see how many of them were like in disrepair, but they were trying to figure out what to do with them. Here we are. It's a little bit of a Geniza. This is in Riga, Latvia. This is in the, how do you call it? In a synagogue attic.
Wow.
This is, you can see in the sack on the right of the picture, you know, if you look at the photograph on the right, this is in an attic, and it's an interesting story. I was there actually with the writer, with Yossi Klein Halevi. Actually, we were spending a whole month in the former Soviet Union as it was falling apart. And we went to Riga, Latvia, and we went to the only synagogue that was left. Whatever the communists did not destroy, the Nazis did not destroyed, then the Russian, the Soviets, the communists did destroy, and they would allow usually one synagogue in a big city. This was the only synagogue that was allowed to continue. I think it was kind of to show that they're not against Judaism and religion. Look, there is a synagogue here. The only problem is you couldn't go to the synagogue if you were a young person. You would be followed up. So when I went in, there was only the elderly was there, and this guy that is sitting is the gabbai. So when I asked him, and I didn't realize through a translator, how come there's hardly any prayer books in the sanctuary, in the main synagogue? And I didn't realize that, but he got insulted, and he said to me, and to Yossi Klein was with me, and he said, do you want to see books? I'll show you books. He was very proud, and so anyway, he took us to the attic, and that's where he was sitting and trying to show off that they do have a lot of books, and some of them are disrepair, and and so on and so forth. I think part of the reason why they put everything up in the attic and it became, in disrepair and damage is because the communists did not want to show the richness of Jewish, of Jewish life and tradition. And how do we show our tradition is by how many books, we wrote the book, thousands and thousands years ago, the Bible, and then we never stopped writing. We Jews just continue to write.
Of the book.
People of the book, of the books, not only of the book, of the book.
There's quite a heated discussion going on here in the chat box.
Yeah.
Emil thought that the most important center was Baghdad rather than Cairo. And Livana said that's because Egyptian Jews are so modest. That's why that's why you thought the biggest center was in Baghdad.
You know what, I'll tell you something. Baghdad was also very important. I'm not a historian, and I'm not going to get into the argument. and you take two Jews and you have 5 arguments or 10 of them. And I would allow, I think it's really for a Jewish historian to really reflect on that. Maybe Professor Simon Shama can, maybe he can do some, tell us. Maybe the guys from the Cambridge, the Geniza can really tell us if there are any questions, she'elot, she'elot utshuvot shoot that would come from, I don't know. But I was told that Cairo back then was the center. Maimonides was there. Don't forget.
Absolutely, yeah.
Okay, and Maimonides back then was the quintessential, of all times, to this day, by the way, but that's another story. Let's continue. I have a few things to show you. I'm going to go fast because we barely have 10 minutes. You see, again, Israel is actually, I want to show what Israel is made up for, and this is Aliyot. People had been coming to Israel throughout, this is, an immigrant from the Soviet Union coming basically with barely anything but the medals. This is what they are very proud of. They're all war heroes, and it's very hard for Israeli society or American society or anyone to appreciate these medals, what these people did for their own country. This is another photograph of this. I was lucky to take a photo, to be there, to take a photograph during Operation, Solomon.
Yeah.
And where in a matter of 36 hours, more than 14,000 Jews came from Ethiopia on an air train. This guy, and I don't have time to elaborate, but he is carrying his mother, who is paralyzed from the waist down of a plane. Okay.
Wow.
So, and here, there's another influx of immigrants from Bnei Menashe from Northeast India. This is in Carmiel, in an absorption center. So you see that when I talk about diversity, guys, it really, the Jewish world is so diverse is here. It's another, I'm just showing you a few faces from different places around the world who immigrated to, or still immigrate to Israel. And here this is the wedding between a, Ethiopian young man and someone from Belarus. And this is that's what they produced. Yes. Okay.
Beautiful.
Okay, so Kamaway. Someone said something about Kamaway. This isn't Kamaway. This woman is Jewish, married to a non-Jew, but they were flower growers. Okay, that they would. You see the machete that the guy holds, that her husband.
So which country is this?
Cuba. Kamaway, Cuba.
Yeah.
Kamaway, Cuba. Remember, someone asked about Kamaway?
Yes,
before?
indeed. Yeah.
Yes. So this is a family in Kamaway. And this is back to Alibaug, India. I'm just showing you different places, okay, Jews in Alibaug, India, Bnei Israel, actually. And you see the hand that was painted. It actually was the interesting thing that it was in red. And this kind of reminds me of that the red that the Israelites back in Egypt during the 10 plagues was supposed to paint on their, the doorposts from, right? That's kind of interesting. So anyway, this is another story. We are here in Peru, in Iquitos. And this is very small community that somehow got there by Moroccan Jews about 100 years ago or so, who came to the Amazon to, they were merchants, with the rubber industry. Some of them stayed, married indigenous Jews, and to this day, you see, that's the last name, Beit Levi. They're Levi, and you see other Moroccan last name there, and it's still some communities, some of them are
in Peru.
In Peru, yeah, okay, in the Amazon in Peru. So these are two cowboys, right? Also in Argentina. This is the settlements that the Baron Hirsch back, I think it's more than 100 years, have allowed Jews from Eastern Europe bought some lands, and it told them, listen, it would be easier for you to move from Eastern Europe to Argentina, in places like Moisesville and many other places that they have established. They became farmers, and they to this day, I mean, I was there about in the early 2000s, and there's still some Jews there in those settlements. So
Right.
these
Gauchos.
are gauchos, exactly, Jewish gauchos.
Jewish gauchos.
Yeah. This is one photograph I took in Yemen. This is back when the first time I was there in 1992. There's a whole story about these photographs. I won't get too much into it. You can see that the man has peyot. That means that, okay. And by the way, in Yemen, they call the peyot simanim, signs. This is the sign that you're a Jew. If every man has to have peyot, I mean, they would have peyot anyway, but if a man decides to take his peyot off, he would be killed by the Muslims, because they would welcome you into being a Muslim to convert to Islam. But if you don't, then we want to see that you are Jew. You are a Jew. Okay.
Wow, that's extraordinary.
So from the get-go, when I was growing up, I had peyot until I was 8 years old, and we always call this simanim, signs. Okay, I'm just showing you a few faces, and I usually ask the audience, you please tell me, what do you think is a Jewish face? Is there any characteristics of a Jewish face? I'm going to go fast.
He looks pretty Jewish to me.
Okay. Because of beard and everything. He's a farmer. He's a farmer, Yemenite farmers in Israel. Okay.
He does look just like Tevye, actually, in Fiddler.
Yeah, well, he looks a bit like Tevye. That's true.
And actually, Janet thinks the same. Yes.
This woman is in Uzbekistan. Okay. So here we have a Yemenite Jew, Bukharan Jew. India, she is from India, a Jewish, a Jew from India. Yeah. 2 little kids from Yemen, in Yemen, that I took their photographs, and you see the peyot, okay? This is a new immigrant in Israel from Soviet Union. I don't know if it's his first watermelon, but he's obviously enjoying. This is a kid in Israel during Yom HaAtzmaut, okay, from Ethiopia.
Yeah. Yeah.
This is a kid from Lithuania, okay.
Beautiful.
And this is a Jewish girl in Yemen, actually. And Jewish girls never really covered up like this, but when they would go out, just not to be different and not to be seen as exposing too much, many times they would be wearing this stuff. Okay. This is a little kid in India during Purim. He has a custom of a Gandhi. This is a little Gandhi on Purim in Mumbai. Yeah, little Gandhi. Okay.
I love the glasses.
Yes.
Oh, that's wonderful.
So this is a little Gandhi in Purim in India. This is a rabbi in Uzbekistan, Bukhara.
Yes.
This is a ranger, American ranger, in here in Acadia National Park in Maine. Okay.
How did you know he was Jewish?
I did a lot of research. How do you think I went to photograph him? I did a lot of research before. I have assistants and so on, getting me names of people that are, when I did the trip up there, whenever I go on a trip, when I came to England last year to London, yeah. I had this young man who is working now for the JW3, yes. Joe Hyman. He did he did all the research for me.
Fantastic.
So I always use people to do a lot of, the groundwork before I go anywhere. This is a rabbi in Los Angeles, Sinai Temple.
Oh, it had to be California again.
Of course, yeah. And I'm ending up, guys, with the photograph of my late father, Alav Shalom.
Oh, yeah.
So that's his face. So if you have any questions, I don't think we have time. I think we are basically, I did it, Lynn, 1 hour.
You did. Fantastic.
The only thing, I don't know if there's any question or anybody wants to ask questions.
We got as much time as we want. If you want,
we don't have a problem, Zion, unless you have to rush off.
No, I can have a few more minutes of questions.
A few more minutes, yeah. Okay. Yeah. A lot of people say thank you and fabulous presentation. A few questions. Do you have a book of photographs?
I have a few. I have one book called The Jews of Yemen. Let me show it to you. And
yes.
The Jews of Yemen, the last generation. It's a big coffee table book. The Jews of Yemen, the last generation. I have the Haggadah, a Haggadah for Passover. I had a few smaller books that I have published over the years. And my dream, hopefully it would come soon, once this were over with this, I want to do actually a big book for Jewish, of the Jewish experience all over the world. Like just put it all in one book and show the diversity as well as as the common thread that runs through us all and what makes us tick, so to speak, as Jews.
And can one actually buy the Jews of Yemen book you wrote?
You can try on Amazon. I know the publisher it's in English and also in Hebrew, by the way, in the same volume. So if you are a Hebrew speaking or English speaking, you'll be fine. The publisher is actually Keter in Israel. I know that they still have a few hundred books from the first edition. You can try on Amazon and see if you can get it on Amazon. Otherwise, I know that Keter in Israel still sell them.
Right.
But
Okay.
I need my distributor to really make sure that Amazon, have some copies of that book.
Right.
And the Haggadah for Passover is definitely available. I'm going to try and do another edition, but a little different, a little fancier. We'll see. Again, it depends on time.
I know you told me that you were actually a product of a yeshiva, and you're still very involved in let's say work to disseminate religion, if you like, to make it more accessible to people. Would that be a fair description?
I would say, yeah. Well, listen, number one, you have to realize I was the first to be born in Israel to my parents. That's why they called me Zion. They already had a bunch of kids before, and I was the first in Israel. So they thought, Zion. So they gave me that name. I really, listen, if you're a Yemenite Jew, you start learning the Aleph Bet, as soon as you can talk. The Yemenites, they don't look at calendars. As soon as you can talk, they start teaching you the Aleph Bet. And very soon you start going, like you chant the Torah in Yemenite trop every day, because they want you to come to shul and be able to recite the Aliyah. Yemenites are the only one, as far as I know, that when you get an Aliyah, to Torah,
Yes.
You are supposed to read, not only to make the blessing, to say the blessing, but also to read your portion. That's why there is a pressure to know the whole parsha,
Right.
to know it by heart, to know the trop, because sometimes you don't know whether you'll do, if you're a Kohen, so you get Rishon. But if you're Levi, you get Sheni or Revi, so there was a lot of pressure for us as kids to know the parsha. So I was chanting Torah every day of the week until my father couldn't force me to do that. And then I was saying, okay, I can, I'm not interested as much. But I'm very happy he did it. And I also went to yeshiva in Israel. It was basically Israeli, Ashkenazi yeshiva. So I studied a lot of Talmud, Mishnah, and everything. And thank God, I wasn't happy about it back then. I was bored sometimes and so on, because when you get into the Talmud, there's a lot of things that are just not relevant to your life, Certain arguments, don't make sense, because if you are arguing, for example, there is a whole argument about, an egg that was laid on Shabbat, are you allowed to pick it up or not? And we didn't have chickens in the backyard. So what do I care? I buy it in the supermarket on the regular day, not on Shabbat. So things like that. But thank God I did have that background, because it helped me put together these curriculums. And it's about really teaching, I have realized it's everything that I do is like triggered. The springboard is imagery, because I believe with all my heart that it's, if you want to engage people, because if you only read, let's say, whatever it is, the Torah, Mishnah, Talmud, everything else after, it's kind of, sometimes it's dry a little bit, because, it's not always, because we're always talking cerebrally to the intellect, to the head. And I'm always saying, that's important also, especially when you're talking about ethics, especially when you're talking about certain things, you have to speak to the heart. If you want to teach about Israel, if you want to teach about, the beauty of Judaism, if you want to teach about values, Jewish values, why don't you start also use imagery? And it's not, so that's number one. Number two, for me, it's also empowering students to reflect. because too much of it when I was growing up is about me listening to a frontal teaching, and not much of me saying what I think about this, And so to me, when we created the Jewish Lens and the diversity lens and everything else, is about empowering students to reflect. So we always, start with an image, go to the text, but also ask them, so what do you think about this? Can you reflect? Can you write your own midrash? Can you take a photograph that reflects that value? Whether it's tzedakah, family, tefillah, whatever it is. So, and it's always ends up usually in an exhibition of the students by the students. And it's very empowering to them. We do, by the way, in Bet Futsot, for the last few years, more than a few years, we have run a contest, global contest, and an exhibition at the museum of the student photographs and midrash or text.
So when can we see this? I mean, I know we're in strange times at the moment.
Yeah.
But,
there is. Yeah. First of all, if I can send you the links. Second of all, I'll connect you with someone, so this way you can disseminate all this information to the people at Harif and beyond. I'll connect you with the people at Bet Futsot that they're now managing it. I managed it for quite a few years, and once my wife got sick, I just didn't have time, and I have other things that I'm doing. I think I told you before, we're doing Pirkei Avot, a whole thing on Pirkei Avot I'm doing with Sefaria. So I'm doing a lot of things, and so the day-to-day management is by Bet Futsot of the Jewish Lens. Right. So
I think that is fantastic, and that's a wonderful note to end on. I think we wish you all the luck in the world with your projects and bringing photography to children and young people and to everyone, in fact. And this has been a fantastic event. Thank you so much, Zion.
Thank you all for listening. I really thank you so much. Thanks.
Thank you. And all of you, please do subscribe to the Harif website if you haven't already.